younger Asian Americans navigate something new to their generation. Taking up space, New York AP, the chairs stay occupied at 12 Pell. Client after client, they come through the tiny barber shop on a narrow side street in Manhattan's Chinatown. They come for the cuts, sure. But really, they're coming for the cool. From New York City, from the metro area, from many states away, they're coming for what they see on 12 Pell's lively social media accounts, where the young, predominantly Asian American barbers offer advice to teens and men of all ages and ethnicities with humor, quips, confidence and ease, and not a hint of hesitation. Kaho Leung, 34, embodies that. A son of Chinatown and one of the founders of 12 Pell, he wanted to start a business that reflected him. His creativity, his long-standing interest in fashion and style, his desire for building the world that I want to live in, not asking for permission. About as American an idea as it gets, right? The hunger to make your own path, to find your own way, make your voice heard? In some ways, Leung is a case study for the latest incarnation of this. A look at social media and pop culture shows plenty of other Asian Americans of his and younger generations doing the same in business, in politics, in content creation, in entertainment, in life. If the space isn't already there, they're determined to create it. This hasn't always been the reality for many Americans. Any look at the country's past shows that such an American reality hasn't always belonged to everyone, including previous generations of Asian Americans. That American notion of having the freedom to stake out your own space. Oftentimes, that has meant less space for others. Earlier generations of Asian Americans, some of whom have been here for well over a century, and others whose roots trace to recent decades, have lived in Americas where their immigrant origin communities were smaller and regarded as intrinsically, unceasingly foreign. Americas where there was little mainstream familiarity with the countries Asians and Asian Americans traced their ancestries to, where there was no internet or social media culture that encouraged people to define their own lives. Instead, there were stereotypes that persist to this day of otherness, of broken English speaking and passiveness, at times sneaky or suspicious, often eating some kind of strange, pungent food. Other iterations included nerds and geeks who could be assumed to ace the math test more readily than score the winning point in the game, or being fashionable enough to offer style guidance. But even as those stereotypes still do harm, they don't have the same power in a country and time when many Americans now eat from a global plate, where yoga studios and henna tattoos, temples and cultural festivals are everywhere, where Asian American creators have some room to tell their own stories, and where the size, variety and geography of Asian American communities have increased dramatically in the last 20 years, even as they remain a small part of the overall whole. Those stereotypes don't touch Leung, born in Maine and raised since childhood in Chinatown, the same way they impacted generations before him. It's funny because even though I watched this type of stereotype and portrayal happen growing up, it never really resonated or hit me that that was what I was up against, he says. There's a stigma that existed, but I always drove in my own lane. To claim space requires moving past old assumptions. Just ask Jeff Young, 56, a writer who has spent decades chronicling Asian American communities and culture. When he's asked if the cultural space that Leung inhabits and makes his own sounds like the world of Yang's childhood, he laughs. I grew up in a world where I felt like everything about me was projected on me by other people, Yong says. The stories that were being told were all told by non-Asians about what I could do, who I could be, what I could look like. It's not as if that world doesn't still exist. Simran Anand, 27, was still part of just one of 3 South Asian families in Reading, Pennsylvania, growing up in the 2000s. She can relate, she says, to the sense earlier generations had of feeling culturally isolated in her day-to-day life when she stepped out of the family home. But she had something they lacked large-scale South Asian communities, like in Edison, New Jersey, where her parents went at least quarterly. A Sikh Gurdwara about an hour away where she could learn about her faith. And the option, when she got to college, of choosing a school where she could join thriving South Asian student groups. For her, it's both and not either, a sensibility she takes to her jewelry company, By Simran, which she started a couple of years ago to create pieces that drew inspiration from South Asian designs but have been adapted to fit her sensibilities as a young American woman as well.